March 9, 1945, Tokyo, Japan. A cold wind sweeps across the darkened streets of the world's largest city. It is almost midnight. The curfew sirens have not yet sounded. In the narrow wooden alleys of eastern Tokyo, mothers cradle infants beneath paper walls. Old men sleep beside charcoal stoves. Soldiers on leave wander home past shuttered shops. The air is still. Above the city, a waning moon hides behind drifting clouds. From the Pacific, they come. At 5,000 feet above the water, the first formations of B-29 superfortresses approach the Japanese coast. Inside one of them, the Dauntless, flown by General Curtis LeMay's 21 Bomber Command, the crew can see nothing but the faint shimmer of moonlight on the waves. The men sweat in their oxygen masks. Even at altitude, the heat is building inside the fuselage. They have stripped away all unnecessary equipment, no defensive armor, no extra gunners. Every pound saved means more bombs. Each bomber carries a deadly new weapon, M69 incendiary cluster bombs. They are small, napalm-filled canisters designed to burst into flames upon impact, igniting everything around them. Tokyo is a city of wood and paper. Tonight, it will become a furnace. Radio silence from this point, LeMay orders. Below, the people of Tokyo hear the distant growl, a sound like approaching thunder. At first, they think it's just another reconnaissance flight. The air raid shelters remain half empty. The anti-aircraft batteries stay silent. Tokyo has been bombed before, but not like this. At 12:08 a.m. the first flares drop. They drift slowly downward, painting the dark city in an eerie orange light. Moments later, the first wave of B-29s opens its bomb bays. Thousands of M69 South rain down. Within seconds, the neighborhood of Shitamachi erupts into flame. Napalm splashes across rooftops, seeping into the walls. Entire blocks ignite at once. The flames climb the wind, merging into a roaring inferno that leaps from house to house. A fireman shouts over the roar of wind. "Water won't stop it! Move! Move!" The pumps fail almost immediately. The water pressure collapses. Civilians run toward the river, their shadows flickering against the walls. The sky is now alive, glowing, pulsing, screaming. From above, the American crews can feel the heat even at 5,000 feet. God almighty, one-tailed gunner mutters. The whole damn city's on fire. By 1:30 a.m., the flames have become a firestorm, a phenomenon so powerful that it creates its own weather. The air is sucked inward at hurricane speed, feeding oxygen into the burning heart of Tokyo. Roofs explode from the pressure. People are pulled off their feet, dragged into the maelstrom of fire and smoke. Inside a cramped shelter near the Sumida River, hundreds of families huddle together. The air grows thin. A woman screams for her child. Another gasps, "We can't breathe." The oxygen vanishes as the firestorm consumes it. Some try to run outside, only to be swallowed by the inferno. Up in the sky, Major Robert Morgan, pilot of the Dauntless, circles to confirm the devastation. Through the haze, the crew can barely make out the outlines of Tokyo, a red, churning ocean of fire. The second and third bomber groups follow, flying low to ensure accuracy. Some are caught in the updraft, tossed thousands of feet into the air. Others are nearly flipped upside down by turbulence created by the heat below. Still, they press on. By 2:30 a.m., nearly 100,000 incendiary canisters have fallen. LeMay's new strategy, low-altitude night firebombing, is working exactly as intended. On the ground, Tokyo's fire brigades are overwhelmed. The rivers are jammed with people. Thousands leap into the water, only to be boiled alive as the surface temperature rises. Survivors will later describe the scene as hell itself. At 3 a.m., a Japanese civil defense officer radios headquarters. Shitamachi is gone. The city center cannot be saved. The flames spread outward in every direction. Over 16 square miles of the city are now engulfed. Inside one of the last shelters, a young woman presses her hands against the door, whispering a prayer. "Please, let it stop." But outside, the wind howls louder than any voice. By 3:30 a.m., Tokyo is no longer a city. It is a single, vast inferno. The flames have merged into a solid wall of heat that stretches for miles in every direction. The air above glows crimson, and the night sky is filled with swirling ash that falls like snow. The crews of the B-29s struggle to maintain formation in the turbulence. The updraft from the firestorm buffets the aircraft violently. Inside Dauntless, Lieutenant Harry Immel grips the yoke with both hands, trying to keep the bomber level as hot air slams into its belly. Instruments flicker and stall. Sweat pours down his face despite the altitude. Feels like the whole damn island's burning, his co-pilot says quietly. General Lemme, commanding from Guam, will later describe this mission as a success. But at this moment, there is no triumph, only disbelief. From above, Tokyo resembles a sea of molten orange, cut by the dark ribbons of rivers filled with firelight and bodies. Below, the sound is indescribable, a mixture of wind, roaring flame, collapsing buildings, and human screams. The fire has reached such intensity that it generates its own cyclones. Tornado-like gusts of superheated air whip through the narrow alleys, hurling debris and people into the flames. On the ground, firefighter Masato Ay and his small crew try to make a stand near the Nihonzutsumi district. They are armed with little more than buckets and canvas hoses. "We couldn't even tell where the fire ended," he would recall years later. "It was everywhere at once." The wooden homes explode as the firestorm leaps from street to street. They retreat toward the Sumida River, coughing through soaked towels wrapped around their faces. At the riverbanks, chaos reigns. Tens of thousands have gathered there, thinking the water will save them. Mothers push children into the shallows, holding them up against the current, but the air itself is aflame. Sparks and flaming debris rain down on the crowd. The napalm burns even on water. Those who leap in are scalded, their clothes melting to their skin. In the midst of this horror, a Japanese air raid warden named Haruo Yoshida shouts into his megaphone, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar. "Don't run toward the city! Stay near the river!" But few can hear him. People run blindly through the smoke, their silhouettes glowing orange. Above, the B-29s continue their passes. Each carries between 6 and 8 tons of incendiaries. The final wave approaches from the south, guided by the light of the fire itself, visible for more than 100 miles at sea. Pilots remove their oxygen masks. The smell of burning wood and oil fills the cabins even at altitude. At 4 a.m., the target area has become unrecognizable. The densely packed neighborhoods of Asakusa, Honjo, and Fukagawa, once home to nearly 1 million people, have been erased. Only blackened chimneys and glowing embers remain. A Japanese civil defense observer radios the imperial palace. "The capital is burning. The fire cannot be contained." All lines of communication have failed. Inside the palace walls, Emperor Hirohito is reportedly awake, pacing in silence as distant flames flicker on the horizon. No one speaks aloud of what it means that Japan's greatest city, its heart of industry and culture, is being annihilated in a single night. By dawn, the American bombers begin to turn for home. Many crews are silent, others talk in low, uneasy tones. Some claim to see the reflection of the fire in the clouds even 200 miles away. One gunner writes later in his logbook, "We could smell Tokyo burning. The smoke followed us all the way out to sea." On the ground, survivors crawl from shelters into a world that no longer exists. Streets have vanished. Canals are choked with ash and corpses. The heat is so intense that metal has melted into pools. The few remaining buildings stand like skeletons against the red dawn. A mother, her face blackened with soot, carries the charred remains of her child wrapped in a blanket. Nearby, monks from a ruined temple chant prayers over piles of bodies, their robes singed by embers still drifting in the air. The official count will never be exact. Japanese authorities will later estimate over 100,000 dead, 1 million homeless, and 16 square miles destroyed. The deadliest air raid in human history. But for the survivors, there is no number. Only silence and the sound of wind moving over ashes. In the Pacific, as dawn breaks on March 10, 1945, General Curtis Emerson Lemme stands inside the operations room at Guam's North Field. The men around him, intelligence officers, mission planners, radio operators, stare at the wall map of Japan glowing under red lamps. Tiny markers indicate returning squadrons from the Tokyo mission. "Estimated 90% back so far, sir," a staff officer reports. Lemme nods curtly. "Losses?" 14 aircraft confirmed down. "Several damaged." He exhales through his nose, emotionless. Out of 334 bombers, fewer than 5% lost, an astonishingly low number given the devastation inflicted. The experiment has worked. But this operation, known as Meeting House, is not an impulsive act. It is the culmination of months of frustration and debate within the U.S. Army Air Forces. For years, the B-29 Superfortress had been touted as the most advanced bomber in the world, high-flying, long-range, and nearly invulnerable. Yet from their bases in the Marianas, American crews had found the Japanese jet stream and unpredictable weather made high-altitude bombing disastrously inaccurate. Factories were missed, raids failed. By early 1945, Lemay, newly appointed commander of the 21 Bomber Command, tore up the rulebook. He stripped his bombers of armor and guns, ordered nighttime low-altitude runs, and replaced general-purpose explosives with napalm-based incendiaries. His target was no longer just Japan as industry. It was the Japanese urban fabric itself. The workshops, small factories and homes that sustained the war effort. "We'll burn them out," he told his subordinates bluntly. The men under him, many veterans from Europe, were uneasy. Colonel Thomas Power, Lemay's deputy, asked, "General, we're talking about civilian areas." "Entire neighborhoods." Lemay's reply was cold and unambiguous. "They make the war. They support the war. The quicker we end it, the fewer will die." Across the Pacific, on Saipan, young crews of the 73rd and 313th Bomb Wings are debriefed in the early morning heat. Many sit silently, staring into tin cups of coffee, faces gray with fatigue. Some speak quietly of the scenes below, the fire, the smoke, the strange glow that followed them out to sea. "We weren't bombing soldiers," one gunner mutters. "We were bombing a city." To their commanders, the mission was a tactical triumph. But to the crews, it felt like something darker, something beyond comprehension. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the Japanese High Command reels from the disaster. The Imperial General Headquarters meets in a haze of disbelief. Communications are down across large parts of the city. Reports come in piecemeal, entire wards gone, transportation halted, industrial zones erased. General Yasushi Iwamura, head of the Air Defense Command, bows deeply before the ministers and whispers, "The defenses failed. The enemy flew too low too fast. Our fighters could not engage. Japan's radar network was limited, its night fighter force almost non-existent. Anti-aircraft guns, set for high-altitude attacks, fired blindly into the smoke. Tokyo was a wooden labyrinth, never meant to withstand fire, much less fire from the sky." By mid-morning, Prime Minister Kuniaki Koiso receives the first casualty estimates. The figures are so high that many refuse to believe them. "It must be a mistake," one aide insists. But the reality becomes undeniable as columns of refugees stream westward, their faces coated with soot and ash, their homes gone. The emperor's advisors urge calm. They avoid discussing the matter directly with Hirohito. The damage, they claim, though severe, is localized. But that evening, smoke still rises visible from the palace gardens. The sweet, acrid scent of burned wood and flesh hangs in the air for miles. On Guam, Lemay drafts his next orders. Tokyo was only the beginning. Within days, the same tactics will be used against Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and dozens of other cities. The mission logs describe them clinically: urban industrial areas. To the Japanese, they will soon mean something else entirely: cities afire. Lemay writes to General Henry Hop Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces in Washington, "The incendiary attacks have proven their efficiency. Recommend continuation on all primary targets. Results exceed expectations." Arnold replies simply, "Proceed. You are getting results." The new campaign is set in motion. Operation Meeting House will be remembered as the opening act of a deliberate, systematic destruction of Japan's cities. But in the shadows of Tokyo's ruins, beneath collapsed beams and smoldering rubble, hundreds still cling to life. Among them are children calling for parents who will never answer, and rescue teams with shovels and bare hands digging through the ashes for survivors. The war in the Pacific has entered its most ruthless phase, and the line between victory and atrocity is disappearing in the smoke. March 11, 1945, the morning after Tokyo's destruction. The world does not yet comprehend what has happened. Tokyo has been cut off. Telegraph lines are melted, post offices destroyed, railways twisted into molten iron. But reconnaissance photos from B-29s returning to Guam confirm the scale of devastation: 16 square miles reduced to charcoal. Entire districts, once teeming with millions, are simply gone. General Curtis LeMay's command staff gathers in a stifling operations hut. Outside, the tropical rain falls on the metal roof, hissing like static. Maps of Japan cover the walls, dotted with red pins, one for each major city. Lemay, cigar in hand, speaks flatly. Tokyo was the first. It will not be the last. His tone is not triumphant, but methodical, as though he were reading out a set of weather reports. The next targets are already chosen: Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, and Yokohama. Japan's industrial arteries. His logic is brutally clear. Factories are dispersed among residential blocks. Small workshops and homes make aircraft parts, ammunition casings, and tools. Destroy the neighborhoods, destroy the war machine. And so the campaign continues. Nagoya, March 11th to 12th, 1945. B-29s arrive at midnight. The sky is clear, the wind calm. The city burns easily. A sea of flames engulfs the suburbs before spreading inward. By morning, 750 acres are gone. The Imperial Aircraft Works, producer of Mitsubishi fighters, lies in ruins. Lemay is pleased, but demands greater saturation. Osaka, March 13th to 14th. 2 nights later, the bombers return. This time, 300 aircraft drop over 2,000 tons of incendiaries. The firestorm spreads across 8 square miles. Flames leap from canals, bridges buckle. One American crew reports, "We saw the city glow white-hot from 50 miles away." Kobe, March 16th to 17th. Wind off the sea turns the bombing run into chaos. B-29s fly at 5,000 feet, barely above the burning rooftops. Anti-aircraft shells burst amid the turbulence. A superfortress explodes mid-air, scattering fragments that rain down like sparks. Japanese defenses are still powerless to stop the raids. Their radar is primitive. Their night fighters few and ill-equipped. The Americans come and go almost unopposed. In the cities below, civilians face the same horror that consumed Tokyo. Wooden houses ignite instantly, water pumps collapse. Families flee toward open spaces, shrines, schoolyards, train stations, but the fire follows. A teacher in Osaka, Mrs. Hiroko Ishikawa, later recalls, "We thought the fire would stop at the canal. It did not. It jumped the water. It burned the air itself." As the raids intensify, American newspapers begin reporting great success in Japan. The tone is clinical, detached. B-29s burn 15 square miles of Tokyo, largest fire raid in history. Few understand what that truly means. In Washington, General Hop Arnold sends congratulations to LeMay's command. He emphasizes efficiency, tonnage, cost per target. "You are shortening the war," he writes. "Keep the pressure constant." But even within the U.S. Army Air Forces there is quiet unease. Some officers question the morality of the raids. Colonel Lawrence Cooter, a planner at Air Force headquarters, writes privately, "If we continue to bomb cities in this manner, future generations may not judge us kindly." LeMay is unmoved. "Our mission," he replies, "is to end the war as fast as possible. That's mercy in the long run." Meanwhile, in Japan, the death toll rises into the hundreds of thousands. Relief stations overflow. The government censors most news of the bombings, afraid of mass panic. Radio. Tokyo reports only enemy attacks on industrial districts, never mentioning that those districts were home to millions of civilians. But the people know. Every night, the skies glow red, refugees pour into the countryside, families are separated. Children vanish amid the chaos. Tokyo's survivors rebuild shantytowns from scrap, only to face new raids weeks later. In an underground command post, beneath the Imperial Palace, officers debate how to respond. Admiral Sonu Toyota, chief of the Naval General Staff, says bitterly, "We cannot defend the sky. We have no fuel, no pilots. The people will face this alone." Prime Minister Koiso, exhausted and visibly shaken, confides to an aide, "If this continues, there will be no Japan left to govern." Yet surrender remains unthinkable. The code of Bushido, loyalty and sacrifice unto death, binds the military leadership. Instead of peace, they prepare the homeland for invasion, drafting civilians into militias. Even as the nation burns, the war machine grinds on. By April 1945, 25% of Japan's urban area lies in ashes. The firebombing campaign expands relentlessly. Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama, all targeted again and again. The skies above Japan belong to the B-29s now. The fires, the smoke, and the smell of burning cities stretch from coast to coast. The empire of Japan consumed by its own vulnerability, wood, paper, and pride. April 1945. Japan's cities are burning faster than they can rebuild. Every week, new reports arrive at the Imperial General Headquarters. Tokyo, again bombed. Nagoya, hit twice in 1 week. Osaka, industrial zones annihilated. Kobe, reduced to embers. The American B-29s flying from the Marianas operate almost without resistance. Japan's Air Force, once the pride of the Pacific, is crippled by fuel shortages and exhausted pilots. Radar installations fail constantly. Ammunition is scarce. The sirens that once warned civilians now sound too late, if they sound at all. By now, the bombing campaign has become mechanical, relentless. The strategy, if it can be called that, is attrition through fire. Destroy enough homes, enough workshops, enough willpower, and the war will collapse under its own weight. In Guam, General LeMay oversees the operation like an engineer calibrating a machine. He adjusts the mixture of napalm and magnesium, changes wind altitudes, calculates the best timing for waves. Efficiency, he tells his staff, is the only morality in war. But for the men flying the missions, the burden grows heavier with every raid. In the briefing hut of the 499th Bomb Group, the smell of coffee and sweat fills the air. Captain Jack Patrick, a 24-year-old pilot from Ohio, studies the map pinned to the wall, his 12th mission in as many weeks. Tonight's target, Kawasaki, south of Tokyo. Low altitude again? He mutters. Yes, his navigator replies. 3,000 feet. Same as before. Patrick exhales, staring at the bomb load list. 6 tons of M69 incendiaries. No armor, no extra guns. He'll be flying almost naked over enemy territory. But by now, enemy territory is mostly ruins. At sunset, the crews board their planes. Engines thunder in the humid night. Mechanics give a last thumbs up as the silver bombers roll down the runway, a procession of fire and steel heading north into the dark. Hours later, over Japan, Patrick's formation descends through clouds. Below them, Kawasaki glimmers faintly under a crescent moon. The first flares drop, followed by cascades of napalm. The city erupts in orange waves. Patrick glances down through his gunsight. He can see rooftops twisting in the fire's reflection. Christ, he whispers. It's all wood. The heat jolts the plane as they pass through the rising air. The crew watches the inferno spread outward like ink spilled across parchment. In 30 minutes, it's over. Another city erased. Back at Guam, dawn breaks over the Pacific as bombers land one by one. Ground crews stand silent, watching the smoke-streaked fuselages return from Japan. No one cheers. The men climb out quietly, eyes hollow from exhaustion. Lemme walks the tarmac, cigar in hand, greeting returning crews with curt nods. Good work, he says. No speeches, no sentiment. Efficiency, always efficiency. In Japan, survivors wander through what used to be cities. The ruins are identical wherever you go. Melted iron, blackened trees, shattered temples, ash piled knee-high. Burned-out trolley cars lie in the streets, their frames twisted like paper. The smell of death hangs in the air. A doctor in Osaka writes in his journal, "We no longer count the dead. We bury the bodies in layers, one atop another, like firewood. The heat of the ground still burns our shovels." At night, the emperor's advisors discuss relocation of the capital. The thought is almost heresy, but Tokyo is gone. Ministries and war bureaus operate from temporary offices in bunkers. Emperor Hirohito remains in the palace, walking its scorched gardens in silence. The ponds reflect not the moon, but the dull orange glow of fires still burning miles away. The nation's morale collapses. Yet official propaganda continues to promise victory. Newspapers speak of honor and divine protection. But civilians know better. They have seen the sky rain fire. By May 1945, the Americans shift tactics again, now combining incendiaries with high explosive blockbusters to shatter firebreaks and kill those hiding underground. The raids no longer distinguish between residential and industrial targets. The aim is to destroy every usable structure in Japan's war economy. On May 25, Tokyo is hit once more. Over 500 B-29s strike in waves through the night. The Air Defense Command, now operating out of underground tunnels, can only listen to the city burn above them. A surviving policeman later testifies, "The heat was so strong we found metal safes melted shut. Bodies burned until only shadows were left on the ground." The American reports note the results clinically. 44 square miles destroyed in the Tokyo metropolitan area. Lemme sends another cable to Washington. Japan's capacity to continue organized resistance will soon be eliminated. He is right, but the cost is beyond comprehension. By June, over 60 Japanese cities have been bombed. Nearly 500,000 civilians are dead. Millions more are homeless. The sky over Japan glows red almost every night. Yet still no surrender. The imperial government vows to fight on, to the last man, the last city, the last ember. And in the shadows of Guam's airfields, the next phase of destruction is already being prepared. A new weapon, one so powerful that even fire will seem merciful by comparison. The summer of 1945 arrives with the same leaden heat that followed so many nights of flame. The Japanese homeland smolders, its railways choked with refugees, its factories ruined or dispersed. In basements and makeshift hospitals, survivors count losses by family names. In the Marianas, on concrete airstrips baked by tropical sun, B-29 crews stand in the shade and talk in low voices about the cities they have left in ruin. The word end hangs in the air, but how to force it remains a question of strategy, of politics, of conscience. On the Allied side, the trajectory of war has moved past tactical experimentation into something epical. For nearly 3 years, a secret program has been underway, the Manhattan Project, a collaboration of scientists, engineers, and soldiers, directed by Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves and driven by physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. At Los Alamos, New Mexico, they have been building a weapon unlike any in human history, a nuclear device harnessing fission to produce an explosion of unprecedented scale. Inside cramped huts in Japan, few know the word Manhattan. They know only the roar of aircraft and the taste of ash. Yet in Washington and London, the calculus is changing. High Command weighs the cost of a full-scale invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, against other means. American planners estimate that an invasion could result in enormous casualties on both sides. Hundreds of thousands of Allied losses and potentially millions of Japanese military and civilian casualties. That grim forecast shapes the decisions that follow. President Harry S. Truman, who succeeded Franklin D. Roosevelt in April 1945, is briefed in the Oval Office. Officials from the War Department and scientists explain the bomb's destructive potential. Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson and General Leslie Groves stress 2 points: the weapon ability to end the war quickly, and its political significance to compel Japan's surrender and to shape the post-war order, particularly with respect to the Soviet Union. The ethical dilemma is acknowledged in private memos and diaries. In public, the tone remains resolute. In New Mexico, those building the device work toward a single demonstration test. On July 16, 1945, at the Trinity site in the Jornada del Muerto Desert, the world's first atomic explosion lights the dawn. Witnesses describe a white blinding flash, followed by a mushroom cloud reaching miles into sky and a shockwave that rattles glass and bone. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," Oppenheimer is reported to have whispered afterward, quoting the Bhagavad Gita, an image that will haunt both participants and history. Across the Pacific, Japanese leaders readied their homeland not for negotiated capitulation but for a last-ditch defense. Military planners implement Operation Ketsugo, mobilizing civilians, arming school children, and preparing to repel an invasion with massed suicide attacks and guerrilla-style resistance. The government calls on the populace for sacred duty, while the reality on the ground is one of fear, exhaustion, and dwindling resources. Food is scarce, medicine rarer still. The last reserves of Japan's Air Force are being fed into kamikaze strikes even as factories burn. Between the firebombing campaign and the atomic program, a grim strategic logic takes shape in Washington: destroy the enemy's capacity and will to fight, then present terms that force a surrender short of invasion. There is intense debate among military, political, and scientific leaders about the first use of the atomic bomb, whether to demonstrate its power on an uninhabited area, whether to warn Japanese authorities, whether to strike at military targets alone. Time, however, presses. The Potsdam Conference, in late July 1945, sees Truman and other Allied leaders demand unconditional surrender. The Allies issue the Potsdam Declaration calling on Japan to surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. The Japanese response is ambiguous and evasive. In Tokyo's ruined districts, survivors speak not of diplomatic nuance but of survival. A hospital orderly in the Koto ward remembers the night raids and later, the hush that followed the Trinity news on American broadcasts. "We had no idea what such a thing might mean for us. We only knew the sky would be quiet for a moment, then something else would come. That something else arrives in August." The 509th Composite Group, trained under Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, Jr., flies from Tinian with a new kind of bomb aboard specially modified B-29s. The first atomic attack falls on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The second follows on Nagasaki 3 days later. The world now wakes to nuclear devastation. Cities flattened not by firestorms alone, but by a heat and blast that erase bodies and melt structures into glass and shadow. Tens of thousands die instantly. Tens of thousands more succumb to injury and radiation in the weeks and months that follow. In Japan, the combined weight of atomic destruction, continued conventional bombing, naval blockade, and the Soviet Union's entry into the war against Japan on August 8 finally breaks a previously unyielding consensus within the inner councils. The Supreme Council for the Direction of the War, fractured and desperate, debates surrender terms. Emperor Hirohito intervenes in an extraordinary radio address on August 15, 1945, the Gyokuan Haska, telling the nation that it must endure the unendurable and accept surrender to pave the way for a new world. The path from Tokyo's fire to nuclear annihilation is not a single line, but a braided set of decisions, each with its own rationales: military necessity, political strategy, scientific triumph, and human cost. For crews at Guam, for scientists at Los Alamos, for survivors in the ash and rubble, the contemplative aftershocks last long after headlines and dispatches fade. The firebombing had shown what modern aerial power could do to cities built of wood and paper. The atomic bombs showed a different order of magnitude, that human technology could, in a single instant, erase whole neighborhoods and linger in bodies and soil for generations. In the months after surrender, Japan would count the costs. Towns and people lost, families severed, cultural treasures destroyed. Around the world, governments and thinkers would wrestle with the moral legacy. Had the use of these weapons shortened the war and saved lives, or had it opened a door to a new, more terrible age? The questions would not, and could not be answered simply. They would be argued in courts of history, in memoirs, in the quiet places where survivors lit candles for the dead. The surrender broadcasts ripple through the islands in fractured static. In half-ruined homes and barracks, people huddle around radios. The voice of Emperor Hirohito, distant, formal, almost ghostly, declaring that Japan must bear the unbearable. For many listeners, it is the first time they have ever heard his voice. Some weep openly. Others stare at the walls, stunned into disbelief. The war, they are told, is over. Yet across the cities and countryside, silence feels like a foreign sound. The familiar throb of engines, the distant roar of bombers, the tremor of air raid sirens, all gone. What remains are ashes, ghosts, and the hollow rhythm of wind moving through collapsed beams. In Tokyo, survivors walk through miles of ruins that stretch as far as the eye can see. Burnt-out trams rust in their tracks. Bridges sag where heat had buckled the steel. A lone woman in a tattered kimono sifts through blackened rubble, searching for a wedding ring. Near Ueno, children with shaved heads sit by a shattered fountain, waiting for parents who will never come. American forces now occupying Japan begin to see firsthand the cost of the campaign they helped execute. Photographers record scenes that even they find unbearable. Whole districts erased, temples scorched to their foundations, neighborhoods reduced to flattened earth. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, military doctors arrive with notebooks and Geiger counters, confronting a new and unfamiliar sickness, radiation poisoning. They document burns that will not heal, fevers without cause, hair falling away in handfuls. The word hibakusha, explosion-affected people, enters the Japanese language and history simultaneously. Meanwhile, in Washington and Los Alamos, reports circulate quietly. Scientists who had celebrated technical success now read medical accounts and photographs of charred cities. Oppenheimer, once the voice of intellectual urgency, confides to colleagues, "The physicists have known sin." Others defend the decision, arguing that the bomb ended the war swiftly, sparing an invasion that could have claimed far greater numbers. The moral reckoning divides not just governments but consciences. The Air Force compiles its own lessons. From the perspective of strategy, the Tokyo firebombing campaign, culminating in Operation Meeting House, is marked as a success. General Curtis LeMay, architect of the low-altitude incendiary raids, gives interviews insisting that the purpose had been efficiency. If you kill enough of them, they stop fighting. His words, stark and unflinching, will echo through the decades as both logic and indictment. The post-war U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey reports that Japan's war production had already been crippled before the atomic attacks, a finding that fuels later debate about necessity versus demonstration. In Japan, the story takes a quieter form. Rebuilding begins almost immediately, driven by the need to live, not by ideology. Women salvage bricks, children gather scrap metal, and carpenters rebuild temples out of what little wood remains. The smell of wet ashes lingers for years. In temporary shrines and schoolyards, families hold memorials for the dead, for those burned, lost, or vanished without trace. Paper lanterns float down the Sumida River each August, glowing softly against the night water, carrying prayers toward the sea. But memory is not only mourning. It is transformation. From 1946 onward, artists, writers, and survivors begin to document what happened, diaries, sketches, testimonies whispered into microphones. The novelist Woku Sheiha writes of cities drowned in light and smoke. Survivors like Kyoko Yoshida, who had escaped the Tokyo firestorm as a teenager, recount the sound of the wind that howled like a living thing. Their words become the moral spine of a generation determined to make meaning from ruin. In the new post-war world, the firebombing of Tokyo, once overshadowed by the atomic bombings, re-emerges as a haunting precursor. The scale of destruction had already surpassed anything imagined by air war theorists before 1945. Single night had killed more civilians than any other bombing raid in history. Yet for years, it remained less discussed, buried beneath the larger nuclear narrative. Only later would historians piece together its true weight. That before the dawn of the atomic age, fire alone had already shown humanity what it was capable of doing to itself. Back in America, returning airmen try to reconcile their role. Some believe they ended the war and saved lives. Others wake in the night to the memory of burning cities. They had done their duty, but the images would not fade. The smell of incendiary gel, the glow of orange seen from 10,000 feet, those memories linger long after the medals are stored away. Oppenheimer's own words seem to echo over them all. We knew the world would not be the same. The ruins of Tokyo would eventually rise again. Streets rebuilt over bones. Glass towers standing where wooden homes once stood. Neon lights reflected on the Sumida River, where lanterns still float each year in remembrance. Beneath all that light lies a question that continues to burn, quietly and endlessly. When does victory end and memory begin? The war ended, but its shadows never left. From the ruins of wood and ash, Tokyo rose again, a city rebuilt on memory. Beneath every skyscraper, beneath the rhythm of trains and the hum of neon, lie the traces of a single night when the sky itself turned against the earth. On March 9, 1945, 100,000 souls vanished in fire. Their names were never listed, their graves never marked. But every summer, the lanterns returned to the river, silent, glowing prayers drifting across the water. The bombing of Tokyo marked the moment when war ceased to be fought between armies and began to consume entire cities. From the air, it was strategy. On the ground, it was apocalypse. Historians would later argue over necessity, over numbers, over orders and intentions. But no report, no survey, could ever measure the weight of a mother's cry or the silence of a child who never woke again. Curtis LeMay once said, "If we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals." It was an admission without apology, a reflection of a time when moral lines blurred in the smoke. And yet, in the aftermath, both victor and vanquished would face the same truth, that modern war with all its science and precision had found a new kind of darkness. The firebombing of Tokyo remains the deadliest air raid in human history, a night when civilization burned to prove its power. But from that devastation rose a vow shared by both sides: never again. In the glow of those lanterns, in the light of the city reborn, the dead still speak. They ask not for vengeance, only remembrance.